The photograph pinned to Maya's cork board showed her younger self, sun-bleached hair, barefoot on sun-warmed concrete, hands raised in celebration as her father sealed the last tile into the pool deck on a golden summer afternoon in 2009. Back then, before the corporate job, before the divorce, before she'd learned that kindness was a commodity people exploited, the pool had simply been her sanctuary. A place where neighborhood kids splashed without fear, where she could float on her back and pretend the world beyond the water line didn't exist. 16 years later, at 38, Maya still maintained that pool with obsessive precision. Every morning at 5 a.m., she swept the deck. Every evening, she balanced the chemicals. The water remained crystalline blue, not because anyone paid her to keep it that way, but because perfection was the only thing she could still control. The world had become unpredictable. People had become cruel, but the pool obeyed her. That's why the day the Hendersons moved in next door, Maya had actually felt something approaching hope. "Oh my God, is that a pool?" Claire Henderson had gasped, leaning over the fence with her hands clasped together. She was 29, with dark eyes that crinkled when she smiled and the kind of effortless prettiness that made women want to be her friend and men want to be better. Her husband, Derek, stood beside her holding their twin toddlers, one balanced on each hip. "It is," Maya had said, and something in her chest had loosened. Here was a young family. Here was a chance to matter in someone's life again. "We've been looking for a neighborhood pool all summer," Claire said. "The city ones are always so crowded. Would you?" She hesitated, and something almost vulnerable crossed her face. "Would you mind if we ever wanted to cool off on a really hot day? We'd be totally respectful, and the kids would wear swim diapers and—" Maya had cut her off with a smile. "Of course, come over anytime, bring friends if you want." That had been her first mistake, not the offer itself. That came from a genuine place. The mistake was believing that generosity would be reciprocated, that people who benefited from her kindness would remember it. The first week was perfect. Claire came over with the twins on a sweltering Tuesday afternoon. The boys splashed in the shallow end while Maya made lemonade from scratch, and they sat under the umbrella talking. Claire told her about her marriage, her struggles to lose the baby weight, her mother's cancer diagnosis. And Maya had listened, really listened. She'd shared too about her own divorce, about the loneliness, about how the pool had saved her sanity. By the second week, Claire was bringing her yoga friends. By the third week, Derek was showing up with his work crew on Friday afternoons. By August, the pool had become ground zero for the neighborhood. At first, Maya didn't mind. She'd spent so long alone that the chaos felt like vitality. Laughter echoed off the water. Music played from Bluetooth speakers. The grill sizzled with hot dogs and hamburgers. She'd never hosted before. Her marriage had been too fractured, her friendships too shallow, and there was a dangerous sweetness to finally being wanted, finally being the person who provided the thing everyone loved. But by late August, something had shifted. Claire stopped texting on non-pool days. The yoga friends, who had seemed so engaged when they were here, didn't acknowledge Maya at the grocery store. Derek's crew had grown careless, leaving beer cans on the deck, shouting profanities that echoed through the neighborhood. And no one, not once, had offered to help with maintenance. No one had brought a dish to share or even offered to buy ice for the coolers they filled with their beer. Most telling, they never invited her to anything. Not to Derek's office party. Not to Claire's birthday dinner. Not to the neighborhood Facebook group that had been created specifically to coordinate pool day rotations at Maya's house. The password to the private group was Pool Day 2024. Maya found this out by accident when Claire's phone buzzed on the lounge chair and the notification flashed on the screen. She didn't look. She absolutely did not unlock it and scroll through the messages, even though the phrase that had caught her eye, "She never comes out anyway," was practically a neon sign begging for context. Why do we even need permission? She basically gave us a blanket invitation. Plausible deniability, lol. The rational part of Maya's brain understood that she'd made a strategic error. She'd created a boundary-less situation. But the older, more wounded part, the part that still remembered being overlooked, undervalued, replaced, recognized this for what it was, being used. She closed the phone. She set it gently back on the lounge chair. And she smiled at Claire when she returned from the bathroom, asked how the twins were doing, and said yes to having the crew over again the next week. Because Maya had learned something crucial in 38 years of life. Knowing someone doesn't care about you is information. And information, used correctly, was power. Over the following months, Maya documented everything with the precision of a scientist recording the behavior of lab specimens. She started a spreadsheet. She would later be grateful for this obsessive nature. It would prove invaluable. August 15, Derek's friend brought a girl, not his wife, to the pool. They were not subtle about it. They made out in the deep end for 20 minutes while Derek's coworker played lookout. August 22, the group left her pool in a state of filth. 13 beer cans, 3 broken pool loungers, plastic cups floating in the water, and most egregious, someone had left a used condom in the cabana changing room. Maya found it with her cleaning net, and something crystalline in her chest finished shattering. August 29, Claire hosted a pool party at a different neighbor's house, which happened to have an HOA and rules, so nobody went, but posted 17 photos of it on Facebook. Meanwhile, Derek texted Maya that evening, "Hey babe, can we use the pool tomorrow? It's gonna be crazy hot, and I promised the guys." The babe stung more than it should have. It was the casual disrespect of it. September arrived, and with it came a shift in the group's behavior. They stopped even pretending. Derek would text her at 7 a.m. saying he'd invited 15 people, and could she heat the pool because it was early in the season and it was cold. The yoga group started posting selfies from the pool on Instagram without tagging Maya or thanking her. Teenagers from 3 blocks over started showing up because they'd heard about that lady's open pool from a friend of a friend. One afternoon in early September, Maya came home from work to find a beach party happening. 37 people. She counted them. There were beer funnels set up. Someone had brought a waterproof speaker and was playing music at a volume that surely violated noise ordinances. A group of college-aged boys was using the diving board to practice flips, and one of them had already cracked a tile on the deck. Claire was there, sunbathing in the corner, and when she saw Maya, she waved. Actually waved, as if Maya was a guest at her own property. In that moment, Maya understood something crucial. They didn't think it was her pool anymore. Through the alchemy of entitlement and repeated intrusion, they had transformed her private property into public space in their minds. It had become, in their narrative, something that belonged to the neighborhood, something that belonged to them. And Maya, the woman who maintained it, who paid the astronomical water bills and electric costs, who had personally installed every tile on that deck, had become the help. A minor inconvenience, an ungracious obstacle to their good time. Oh hey, Derek wanted to throw a little thing. It got bigger than expected, but everyone's having such a great time. Come swim with us. You never actually get in the water, you know. You should relax more. Maya, come on. You literally said people could come over anytime. You can't just change the rules because you're jealous that we're having fun without you. Jealous, the word hung in the air like smoke, and Maya understood then that her generosity had been reframed in their minds as loneliness. Her boundaries had been reframed as clinginess. She was the sad woman with the pool, and they were simply being kind by using it. "I'm asking you all to leave," Maya said quietly. The pool cleared in 10 minutes. But the damage wasn't just to the property. The damaged tile, the scratches on the deck, the filter that would need replacing thanks to all the debris. The damage was social. By evening, Maya's name had been strategically misrepresented across the neighborhood Facebook group as difficult, rude, and not a team player. Derek texted her that night, "Claire's upset. You really hurt her feelings. She was just trying to make friends." And that was when Maya made her decision. She wasn't going to ask them to leave anymore. She wasn't going to establish boundaries. She was going to let them come. Let them think they'd won. Let them believe the pool was theirs to exploit. Maya had always been detail-oriented. It's what made her good at her job in pharmaceutical compliance. The ability to read dense legal documents and extract the crucial hidden clauses that could shift an entire agreement. That same skill, she realized, could be applied to something far more satisfying than corporate contracts. For 3 weeks, she planned. First, she hired a lawyer and sent a formally worded cease and desist letter to Derek and Claire, documenting every single unauthorized intrusion into her property with dates, times, and evidence. Those photos she'd taken, the text messages, screenshots from the Facebook group. The letter made clear that they had crossed from implicit welcome into trespass, that their failure to respect stated boundaries after they'd been verbally withdrawn on September 6th constituted harassment, and that any further use of her property without explicit written permission would result in legal action. The letter also included a copy of her property's HOA rules. Yes, her community had an HOA, something Derek and Claire had somehow never asked about. which explicitly stated that shared amenities, like pools, could not be used to host gatherings of more than 6 unrelated adults without filing for a community event permit. Every party they'd hosted had violated this rule. Maya had documentation of at least 8 violations. She sent copies to the HOA as well. Derek's response came within hours. He appeared at her door furious, his face red with the kind of rage that only came when someone realized they'd been caught and outplayed. "Derek, this is insane, Maya. We're neighbors, we're friends, and you're threatening us with lawyers." "Maya, friends ask permission, friends respect boundaries, and friends certainly don't text other people asking when I won't be home so they can invite actual people instead of me. I don't care if it was a joke. The letter is clear, no more unauthorized use of my property." Derek stepping closer, voice low and menacing. "You know what your problem is? You're bitter. You're alone and you're bitter and you thought you could buy friendship with this pool. Well, guess what? Nobody actually liked you, Maya. We only hung out with you because of the pool. You understand that, right? Without it, you're nothing." He left before she could respond, and Maya stood in her doorway, feeling the words like stones in her chest. Because Derek was right about one thing, she had tried to buy friendship. But he was wrong about what came next. Because Maya had learned something from his cruelty, people like Derek only understood power, and she was about to have all of it. The cease and desist worked, sort of. Derek and Claire stopped coming by in large groups, but they replaced it with something worse, passive-aggressive cruelty. They complained to the HOA about her pool being noisy during her morning maintenance routines, which happened at 5 a.m. with a soft broom. They filed a complaint claiming her filter was leaking chemicals into their yard. It wasn't. They left angry comments on her next-door profile about selfish people who hoard community resources. Most calculated was their campaign to poison the neighborhood against her. Claire, Maya would discover through careful social engineering, a fake Facebook profile, some casual eavesdropping at the grocery store, had told everyone that Maya had suddenly become a resource hoarder, that she'd always been unstable, that they should have seen the warning signs of her mental health issues earlier. It was character assassination, and it was brilliant in a way. It made Maya the villain in the narrative they were crafting. But Maya had something better than character. She had documentation, and she had the second phase of her plan. She contacted the HOA and filed a formal complaint against Derek for the noise from his Friday afternoon work crew gatherings that clearly violated quiet hours. She attached audio recordings, which she'd legally obtained by recording from her own property. When the HOA fined him $500, he tried to claim that Maya was persecuting him. But Maya had photocopies of the HOA bylaws that clearly stated anyone could file noise complaints. The fine stood. Then she discovered something more useful. Derek had been dumping his work crew's waste disposal into a municipal drain that connected to the shared neighborhood storm drainage system. This was, according to city code, a federal EPA violation. She reported it anonymously to the city environmental compliance office. Derek's company faced an investigation. It didn't result in criminal charges. His lawyer was good. But it cost him tens of thousands in consulting fees to prove he'd corrected the violations. He sold his house in November. The for sale sign went up on a Tuesday, and Maya watched it from her back porch with a small, satisfied smile. But before he left, there was one more thing she needed to do, one more truth she needed to document. Maya hadn't planned to hire a private investigator. That had been an impulse born of rage and wounded pride. But when she found herself sitting in the office of Thomas Chen, a former detective who now investigated infidelity cases, she couldn't quite articulate why she was there. "I just need to know," she said finally. "I need to know what I was really dealing with, if I was just being paranoid or if they were actually betraying you," Thomas finished. He was kind, which made it harder. "That's not paranoia, that's self-respect." The investigation cost her $3,500 and took exactly 2 weeks. Thomas Chen was efficient and thorough. He photographed Derek with his mistress, the girl from the pool, at a hotel on Maple Street. He documented Derek's wife's patterns. She was, Thomas reported with delicate compassion, aware of the affair and had been for months. She was staying for the kids and the financial security. But what Thomas found most interesting, what he actually brought to the final meeting with a concerned expression, was that Derek had been stealing company materials and selling them to a competitor. This wasn't speculation. This was documentary evidence, Photographs of Derek in a parking garage with a man from his rival firm handing over what appeared to be encrypted drives. This isn't my field, but if he's selling proprietary information, his company could take civil action. Criminal action depends on the value of what was taken and whether his employment contract had specific IP clauses. Yes, but Maya, I want to caution you about what you do with this. I've been doing this work for 15 years, and I've learned that revenge looks sweet in the moment, but it has a way of. I'm not going to do anything illegal. I'm just going to tell the truth. But which truth exactly? Maya spent a week considering her options. She could send everything to Derek's wife. The proof of the affair would be a knife twisting in her back, yes, but it would also give her ammunition in a potential divorce. Custody leverage, financial leverage. It would destroy Derek's carefully constructed suburban facade. She could send the IP theft information to Derek's company. That would cost him his job and potentially expose him to criminal liability if the company decided to press charges. That was the option that appealed to her most, though she couldn't quite explain why until late one night when she was scrolling through Claire's Instagram and saw a new post. A photo of the pool, taken from her own back porch, captioned, "Miss my favorite summer spot. Can't wait until we move to the new place so we can upgrade to something just as nice pool season good times." Upgrade, as if the pool had been a phase, a temporary amusement. As if Maya had been a temporary amusement. The package Maya sent to Claire's address was unmarked and contained three things: the photographs of Derek and his mistress, with dates and times stamped on each one, copies of the parking garage photos showing him selling company information, and a simple printed note that read, "He's been lying to you. These are just the things I found. I'm sure there's more." She sent it on a Friday afternoon and watched Derek's car leave the driveway at 6:47 p.m. that same evening. Derek's face visible through the windshield as Claire drove, her own face a mask of controlled fury beside him. Later, through the neighborhood Facebook group, from which Derek had already begun distancing himself, Maya would learn that Claire had consulted a divorce lawyer within 2 hours of receiving the package. That Derek's company had launched a formal investigation into the IP theft and was considering pressing charges. That Derek had taken a job offer from a company in Phoenix and would be relocating within the month with Derek Jr. As people had started calling the mistress, inevitably, while Claire and the twins remained in their rented house, where Derek now had to pay child support and alimony. It was clean, it was surgical. It was, in every way that mattered, perfect justice. And it was going to destroy Maya just as completely as it destroyed Derek. 3 months later, in a cardigan and khakis, Claire knocked on Maya's door at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. She looked like she'd aged years in those 3 months. Her eyes had that hollow quality of someone who'd spent too many nights crying. Her hair, once carefully styled, was pulled back carelessly, and in her hands she held a folder. Maya's instinct was not to open the door, but some masochistic part of her needed to see what came next. "I know it was you. I don't have proof that would stand up in court, but I know. And I wanted you to look me in the face and tell me why." "That's not why. That's what you're telling yourself because it sounds better. But the real reason is that you were lonely and you wanted to punish me for not filling that void for you. Because I was friendly but not actually your friend. Because I used your pool without asking permission and that hurt your feelings, so you decided to blow up my entire life." The accuracy of it stung. Not all of it. Maya genuinely hadn't cared about the affair, hadn't sent the photos out of solidarity with some sister code principle. But Claire was right that the core motivation had been punishment. Revenge. The transformation of betrayal into justified cruelty. "My children don't have their father in the house anymore. The twins ask where Daddy is every single night. I'm working 2 jobs to pay for the house he left me in. And I'm filing for bankruptcy because his legal fees from the IP theft investigation took everything we had saved." He did what he was going to do anyway, yes. But you accelerated it. You weaponized it. And what I'm here to tell you is that I've spent 3 months talking to a therapist about this, about you, about my own complicity and how we treated you. And I've come to understand something. Claire opened the folder. Inside were printed out screenshots of messages, group chats, yes, but also individual conversations. Maya saw her name, her face, evidence of jokes she'd made at Claire's expense, comments about her clothes, her age, her obvious loneliness, pages and pages of casual cruelty documented over months. And below that were other screenshots. One's showing Maya researching hearing a private investigator, one's showing Maya's fake Facebook profile, one's showing Maya photographing Claire's car at the lawyer's office, emails to Derek's company, anonymous tips sent to the city. You premeditated this, Maya. You documented your revenge for months, and what's worse is you convinced yourself you were righteous. You were the wronged party, the generous woman whose kindness was taken advantage of. But the truth is, you're a woman who bought friendship with a pool and then destroyed a family when that transactional relationship didn't develop into something real. Yes, we did, and that was wrong, and I'm sorry for that, but you know what the difference is between us. I'm capable of recognizing my wrongdoing without burning down your entire life to balance the scales. I'm capable of acknowledging that I was cruel to you while also understanding that your response was psychologically unhinged. The folder had more than just screenshots. It had documentation of Maya's activities, things Claire had hired her own investigator to confirm after she'd received the anonymous package. It had the private investigator's invoice, complete with Thomas Chen's testimony about the emotional state Maya had been in when she hired him. It had emails between Claire and her lawyer discussing whether what Maya had done constituted cyberstalking. I'm not going to press charges, Claire said flatly. Not because you don't deserve them, but because my children have lost enough. What I'm going to do is tell you the truth. You've destroyed yourself far more effectively than you destroyed any of us. Because Derek's already in Phoenix with a new girlfriend, starting a new job, barely even thinking about this. My divorce is processing, and I have primary custody, and honestly, I'm going to be better off. But you're going to have to live in this neighborhood knowing that everyone knows what you did. Knowing that you premeditated revenge like some psychopath, and then convinced yourself it was justice. Because I told them not to punish you, to warn them. You're not a victim, Maya, you're a cautionary tale. You're the woman who used private investigators and fake profiles and anonymous tips because your neighbors didn't become your best friends. That's not a sob story. That's pathology. She still maintained it. Old habits die hard, and there was something almost meditative about the morning routine, the sweeping and the chemical balancing and the precise ordering of the deck chairs. But she no longer swam, no longer floated on her back and pretended the world couldn't touch her. Something in her had fractured when Claire walked away from her door, and no amount of chlorine could clean that out. The neighborhood avoided her with the particular cruelty of people who had been reminded of what they were capable of. Not just Derek and Claire. The entire community had learned about Maya's revenge, and it had transformed their discomfort with her solitude into something sharper. She was no longer the lonely woman with the pool. She was the woman who went to insane lengths to punish people for not being her friends. When she went to the grocery store, conversations stopped. Parents pulled their children away from her. The HOA president, once cordial, now responded to her emails with rigid formality. The young couple who had moved into Derek and Claire's old house, the ones who seemed kind, who had even asked if they could occasionally use the pool, received cold warnings from other neighbors about the unstable woman next door. They still used the pool, but they never made eye contact with her when they did. It was on a Tuesday in June when the realization truly hit. Maya was at work in a compliance meeting, barely listening as her colleague droned on about regulatory updates when a notification pinged on her phone. It was from next door. A photo of her pool taken from the street, through the fence, with a caption from an anonymous account. Beautiful pool, looking for the best-kept secret neighborhood amenity. Within an hour, there were comments asking for permission to use it, asking if there were family swim hours, asking what the water temperature was. Within 2 hours, 2 teenagers had jumped the fence and were in the water before she could get home from work. And Maya, standing in her kitchen watching them through the window, felt nothing. No anger, no violation, just a profound and crystalline emptiness. She called the police to report the trespass. When the officers arrived, they were polite but cool. "Is this a new thing?" one of them asked carefully. "Trespassing." He didn't say her name, but she understood what he meant. He'd heard the stories, and in his mind, Maya's complaint about teenagers in her pool came with all the context of her destruction of Derek and Claire's life. She was the woman who couldn't be trusted, who took things too far, who weaponized systems against people. The teenagers left. They didn't return that night, but everyone understood the pool belonged to them now. Maya had weaponized it into a punishment tool, and now it had been weaponized against her. When she listed the house, she didn't even try to feature the pool in the photos. The realtor suggested it, but Maya refused. "I want someone who wants the house, not the pool," she said flatly. and eventually 3 months later a woman named Jeanette bought it. Jeanette was in her 70s, recently widowed, moving closer to her grandchildren. She didn't care about the pool. In fact, the first thing she did was file for a permit to drain it and convert the space into a meditation garden. The day the pool was drained was the day Maya finally felt something like peace. The clear blue water that had been her sanctuary for 16 years was sucked out through white tubes, leaving behind only exposed concrete and tile. The space that had housed her loneliness and her revenge was being erased. She moved into an apartment on the other side of the city. A place with no yard, no pool, no history. Just clean, blank walls and the possibility of being unknown. Claire's divorce was finalized 4 months after Maya moved. She found out through a mutual acquaintance, the same yoga friend who had once mocked her on Facebook, now friendly again now that Maya was gone. Claire had gotten the house, primary custody, and a substantial settlement. She was, according to the acquaintance, actually happy for the first time in years. Derek had married his girlfriend in Phoenix. They had a child together within a year. He'd started a consulting business that specialized in helping companies manage IP security, the irony of which was not lost on Maya when she heard about it. He'd transformed his greatest failure into his most profitable business. And Maya, she lived quietly. She worked. She went to therapy, where she slowly began to understand that her need for the pool to be a perfect reflection of her perfect boundaries had been a symptom of deeper pathology. She learned that loneliness, combined with the power to exact revenge, had transformed her into something she didn't recognize. The hardest part wasn't living with what she'd done. It was understanding that she'd been right to feel violated, right to feel used, right to want the boundary breaking to stop, but that her response had transformed her from a victim into something far more sinister. A perpetrator, a planner, a woman who had weaponized truth and turned it into a scorched earth policy. One day, almost 2 years after she'd moved, Maya saw Claire at a coffee shop. She was with her twins. They were older now, less baby-like, more whole. Claire was laughing at something one of them had said, and there was a lightness to her that hadn't been there when she'd stood on Maya's doorstep with that folder. Maya wanted to approach her, to apologize, to explain that she understood now that therapy and time had transformed her understanding of what she'd done. But when Claire looked up and made eye contact with her, Maya saw something in her expression that stopped her cold. It wasn't anger. It was a kind of studied indifference. The way you look at someone who was once important to your life but has now become simply a stranger. A cautionary tale. A closed chapter. That night, alone in her apartment with its blank walls and anonymous furniture, Maya understood finally what her revenge had actually cost. Not Derek. He'd landed on his feet like most people of privilege do. Not Claire. She'd transformed her trauma into wisdom and was rebuilding. She'd had a choice once back when she first found those text messages on Claire's phone. She could have accepted that sometimes people aren't kind, that transactions masquerading as friendships aren't really friendships, that the world was full of people who would use her if she let them. She could have built actual boundaries, said no to future intrusions, and moved on with her life. Instead, she'd chosen to be someone who hired private investigators, someone who created fake profiles, someone who weaponized truth into revenge. And in doing so, she'd become far more corrupted by the situation than any of the people who had wronged her. The pool was gone now. Jeanette's meditation garden had been installed. Maya sometimes wondered if the meditation helped anyone find peace, or if the space still carried the weight of all the resentment that had accumulated there over those months when she'd stood on the edge, watching people use and exploit her property, planning her revenge with the precision of a general planning a siege. Sometimes late at night, Maya understood what Derek had meant when he'd said that without the pool she was nothing. He'd meant it as a cruelty, but it had turned out to be a kind of prophecy. The pool had been so central to her identity, so enmeshed with her sense of self-worth, that losing it, not losing it physically, but losing the narrative she'd constructed around it, the revenge story that made her the victor instead of the villain, meant losing herself entirely. She was rebuilding now, slowly, in therapy in her apartment in the blank slate of anonymous days. She had joined a support group for people struggling with loneliness and isolation. She was taking a pottery class, which was ironic because pottery was about creating structure from shapelessness, and she was desperately trying to do the same with her life.